fishing an aluminum boat, and I'd see him down at Tashmoo, and he almost wore the aluminum out of this boat. And I mean, not like, just wore it down. Like, I know a guy up the street here, his dad's a tin banger and a tinsmith, and that guy wore the floor right off where he worked for decades. The pine boards are worn right down, the nail heads are worn off. And I thought of Peter Cox when I thought about him walking the rivets right out of his boat. And he recently upgraded to this beautiful regulator, beautiful boat, and no one deserves it more after all of the sea time he put in this aluminum boat. So he's getting used to his new craft, and he's got his whole family out with him, and they're just enjoying the day like there's no tomorrow, and something happens. My phone rings. It's Peter Cox. And he had some trouble with his boat. And with most boats, I just want to state this before I give the mic up to him, that they require gasoline. Oh, I'm going to let you know that after we got back to the dock, he bought me a beautiful pair of shoes as a memento, bringing them in. And his wife still hugs me. She was so scared. Peter, come on up.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I guess the important thing to realize is when you buy a new fancy boat, you need to look at the dials really carefully and figure out which one says what. Because I kept looking at the wrong dial. I got plenty of fuel. It's got bad fuel. But anyways, we got through that. And what I want to talk to you about is my first Swordfish trip. And it was back in the early 70s, and I was in my early 20s. I was painting in Atlanta, Georgia, and grew up with these three brothers. And their older sister married a guy from Gloucester named Bisk Chambers, who was very quickly called Captain Bligh. But Bisk needed a cook, and this was my big chance to get out on the water. I'd always fished from the shore. So the first thing I did was I called my mother, and I say, "Mom, they want me to cook." And she said, "Well, this is going to be easy, son. We're going to make up a little file card cabinet for you with recipes, and I'll get you all hooked up. It's going to be great." So I got that. I drive down to Florida to Panama City, which is kind of what they refer to as the armpit of Florida. It's way on the western side, and I had no idea what to expect. The first thing is they throw the word Peter out the window, and I'm officially Cookie. Everybody just calls me Cookie. So I was cooking for 5 years on different boats. And I've got to go get the groceries for this first trip, or grub up as they say. And they gave me $1,000, kind of gave me an idea of what you needed to get. And down there's not a Stop and Shop, there's a Piggly Wiggly. And I go to Piggly Wiggly, and I start loading up carts, and I sort of find the manager said, "Well, I'm going to need 16 gallons of milk and 15 dozen eggs and all these different things," and carts start getting lined up, and suddenly I've got 5 carts like a caravan. So I get to the checkout, and I just remember when we finished, and I paid the lady, she grabbed a paper bag and hit a button, and all these green stamps started coming out of the bag. For back then, you used green front stamps, and I thought to myself, what am I going to do with these? So I look at the lady behind me, I said, "Do you use these?" She said, "Absolutely." I said, "Well, I'd like you to have these." And I just handed the whole bag to her. We get all the food to the boat and get it all put away. Things are buried in the ice, things are put up forward. And we start to spend a day doing some deck work, and I'm trying to ask these guys, "Well, what's it like? You know, where do you stand? What do you..." And I said, "Do you get sharks?" They go, "Oh yeah, we get sharks." And this one guy said, "When we get the hammerheads, when they come up, we stab them in the eye and they go nuts." And I'm like, "Really?" And so we start off, and Panama City, we went right straight out into the Gulf, and we were probably sort of off Tampa, 60 or 70 miles. And a couple of days go by, and I cook some meals. And it was probably the third day, and all of a sudden a hammerhead shark comes up, and I'm like, get him in the eye, get him in the eye. And the guy turns to me and said, just relax, kid, we're professionals. And what you do is you put a long kitchen knife on a big pole and lash it down. You reach down and cut the leader, and the shark swims away. And I was told that the hook comes out very quickly. Rusts out in about a week. But about the fourth day, all of a sudden the wind picked up. And within about 2 hours, I realized this is pretty rough out here. And it's a day's work to try to keep your balance. And as the moments went by, I sensed that everybody was getting a little nervous. It gets so rough that the long line gear starts to break up, and you'll use a piece, and you get up in the pilot house and start looking for orange balls that hold the line up. And I remember standing on the pilot house, and I turned to this guy, Tommy Rooney, and I said, wow, it must be going about 30 miles an hour. He goes, it's blowing about 60, just hold on, kid. You fish along next to other boats, and a boat outside of us is about a quarter mile off, and you set your long line in a straight line. And I realized that we were going up, and I could see the wrecks, and then we would disappear in a trough, and all I could see was water all around me. Well, out there, the waves aren't like the beach, where they come in like this. The waves are much more like this. And I realized that the waves were probably as big as a 2-story house. And your hook lines are spaced every 60 feet apart, because there's a knot every 60 feet, and your hook lines are 16 feet long. And I remember going up and seeing 3 hook lines with mackerel pop out of the water. And I thought, these waves are really getting kind of big. But we lost some gear, got it all on board. We got through that day, and it was time to try one of my mom's recipes. So I decided to cook lasagna, and got all the ingredients out, made up this big pan, did everything she told me to do. And you usually will just put something out on the table that's got wet paper towels so the guys could just dig in. And when you're out there, you could probably cut up a fish boot, put a little butter on the pan, and they'd eat it. So I put this lasagna out, and I sort of stepped back, and all of a sudden I'm hearing this crunching noise. And I said, oh, that's not good. And I suddenly realized I had forgot to cook the noodles. But I got past all that. And as a greenhorn, you go through the typical rituals of asking to bite the head off a mackerel and all the silly stuff that you do. But I really fell in love with being on the water, and fished on, I think, 5 different boats, spaced out over 5 years, fished for some of the guys in Menemsha, and really had a wonderful time. That's one story. The other one is I wanted to tell you about the fluke that I caught. And when I started to spend more time here in the summer, I always lived in Connecticut, would come on the weekends, and with this infamous little green aluminum boat, they had a little fluke tournament out of the VFW hall, and it's kind of a little blue-collar tournament. There's not a lot of fancy frills or any big prizes, and I thought it'd be really fun to enter into it. So this particular year was 2010, and I don't usually have a lot of people that I can go with. You can have a team of 4, and and you don't have to fish. Everybody doesn't have to be in the boat. They can come on at different times, and you weigh in your catch. But my niece, Nina, who was probably 20 years old, I could always talk to going out. I'd bring her a little cooler of beer, and she was 20 years old then, I think, and I'd take her to Menemsha for a nice fish sandwich, and she would hang out with me. And here we were in the middle of the afternoon, and a lot of boats fish along the North Shore, and you go out where the water's nice and deep. There's a big trough, and you just kind of keep drifting through that trough, and you bounce your sinker on the bottom. And what's fun about fluke fishing is you don't have to be very good at it. I think a lot of it's luck. But at this particular time, it was just no wind, flat calm. I think a dead tide, and all of a sudden I felt kind of a little tap my rod, and I sort of pulled up with a reaction, and I felt like I had a pretty good fish on. So I'm just taking my time and slowly pulling up, crank, pulling it up, crank. And Nina's just kind of watching. I'm just saying, I don't know, it could be a nice one, could be something we could weigh in. And all of a sudden this fish came out from underneath the aluminum boat, and it was the size of a doormat, and it just, and typically when you fish by yourself, you have to hold the rod up behind you and you reach with the net carefully and try to net it. So I sort of got everything all set, got this fish up on the surface, and as I reached over, fish just kind of slid right out over the end and went down again. I brought it up twice and I couldn't get it, and I said, Nina, you need to take the rod and just bring it up nice and easy. So I scooped the fish up, brought it on board, and I looked, and the line had gone around the fish's mouth, and the hook was sticking in its nose. And it's just, I've never seen that in my life. And I quickly just opened it, put it in the cooler, and just sat in the cooler. So he just couldn't get away. I said, I think we caught a 10-pound fish. I think this is a 10-pound fluke. And this was awesome. So we fished a little bit longer. It's time to go in, and you drive over with your catch to the VFW hall. And I just walked up with a cooler, didn't say a word to anybody, and this guy was weighing in a nice 7-pound fluke, which like put him in second place. And I let him kind of leave, and I stood in front of Peter, the weighmaster, and I just opened up the cooler. He went, oh my God. Hey fellas, come over and look at this. And he said, we've never seen a fish this big. I might as well just hand you all the money now. And we weighed it, and it was 15 pounds, 2 ounces. And so my dream of catching a 10-pound fluke, I exceeded a little bit. And he said, you really need to go over to Dick's Tackle Shop and have him take a picture of it and actually register it for a fish for the state. So I did that, took some nice pictures, and I ended up getting the largest fluke for the year in Massachusetts. That for being a summer person, that gave me a little status with the guys down at the dock, which made me feel good. I can say that I'm 63 and I've been here 64 summers because my mother brought me in a basket. But my wife and I both moved here full time a couple years ago. And I just want to say, out of all the fish that I've caught in my life, the best catch is somebody that I live with. So, thank you.